Hello, my name is Kelly Raykirk-Patrick, and I have done this PowerPoint on the sustainability of the system that is operating currently at Rochester Beacon Academy. Rochester Beacon Academy is a public charter school located in southwest Rochester. The purpose or function of a system can best be determined by watching as a system operates, not by reading the purpose statement. I found this very intriguing when Dr. Franz mentioned this in her lecture last week. I was immediately recalled to many of the concerns I had had at Rochester Beacon Academy throughout this last academic year. I would read their purpose or their mission statement, and I would see that what they were doing didn't necessarily coincide with what I was seeing or what was supposed to be happening with their mission statement. I wondered what the problem was and why there was something wrong. Everything seemed to be put in place before they had opened, as I had been to a lot of the meetings and helped the school to get up and running. So I thought this would be the perfect project to do with this class in trying to figure out what really is the culprit for why the teachers, the staff, the students, why everything isn't running according to what the mission statement is. So let's start with the stock in the system. There is funding for the school. There's the physical location of the school. There's the administration. There's teachers and staff, and there are the students. All of those five together comprise the stocks within the system that can fluctuate depending upon where we are in the year or from when the school has started. If we add the flows to the system next, I find that everything comes out of funding for the school. Funding is necessary to rent the location for the school. It's necessary to hire an administrator for the school and all of the office help that's required. It's also necessary for hiring teachers and staff to run the school. And it's necessary to have all of these above mentioned items to support the students that are enrolled in the school, but also to do various other things at the school, like supply the food, the lunch program, and social work care, and those kinds of things that aren't listed here because they don't necessarily stem from or contribute to the mission statement or the purpose of the school. So where does the funding come from? Well, when I dove into looking at this, I realized that it came from the Minnesota Department of Education. It came from grants that the school had applied for and was eligible for up to 2 years prior to opening the school last fall. And it also comes from loans for the school. The administrator just went up to the cities last week to get a loan to get the school to the end of the year to be able to pay for things that were necessary to take us through June 9th. So all of that funding flows down through the location, the administration, teachers and staff, and the students. And almost all of that funding, save 10%, comes from Minnesota Department of Education, grants, and loans. Who controls when and how much funding the Minnesota Department of Education receives? And who controls where the funding is dispersed? When I started looking into this, it was no surprise that I found it was the Minnesota Department of Legislature. The Minnesota Department of Legislature, or the Minnesota Legislature, excuse me, is most directly responsible for the funding of all of the schools in the state, whether they are private, whether they are public, or whether they are charter or choice schools located in our school. They also take care of secondary and higher ed, such as Winona State University. They are the folks that are responsible for getting all of the funding channeled to where it needs to go. Is the U.S. Department of Education involved? I thought that they would be, but when I went onto the website and learned more about how the U.S. Department of Education is only minimally involved in states and local city school systems, I found that they are only contributing about 10 or 11% to the current education system that we see in individual states and in various areas throughout certain states. They really are not helping per se in educational goals, in curricula, in any of the objectives for learning. Those are always set at the state level or local levels. The US DOE is more of a helper with hot lunch programs with the USDA or with meeting the needs of individuals with disabilities, the IDEA, Individual Disability Education Act, or the ADA, or some of the civil rights things that have come out of the Education Act that was passed in the early 60s. When I sought out to find somebody to blame for why the school was failing so badly, or not meeting its mission statement at all, really, I really can't blame the U.S. Department of Education. They have nothing to do with the situation that's currently going on at Rochester Beacon Academy. So, listing the sources for funding, there is the 10 to 11% from the U.S. Department of Education, but the Minnesota legislature is really the largest source for supplying the MDE with the grants and loans and any of the funding for any schools throughout each individual state. Also, because the MDE is willing to take private donations or private sourcing, it would also be the teachers and the staff to schools. It might be students, wealthy philanthropic individuals who would want to contribute to schooling, school funding, and also it is administrators that supply funding as well to the school system on a state level. So we have sources for funding in the system. What would some of the sinks be? Well, that's pretty obvious when I look at this system. It's the rent that gets paid for the location and all the supplies that go into keeping that location up, custodian fees, supplies for FIED, microscopes, lab equipment, paper. Paper is a huge sucker of inputs and outputs for the sources that come into the school. So the physical location is a sink. The administrator's salary and anybody running the office gets paid to work their job there. The teachers and staff are certainly funded and have a nice benefit package. And the students are a sink. We pay for them through the hot lunch program, the social workers, the school nurse, many of the things having to do with the school, almost all of the things having to do with the school, have a direct impact on the students. So those are the 4 sinks in this particular system that I have set up. Levers in the system, as I started working on putting this PowerPoint together, I actually didn't do this on paper. I built the PowerPoint while I was thinking, and it was pretty clear to me that the largest lever is the funding. Without the first year funding that is available to, well, let me start again. The first year funding to a charter school is very, very different than the funding that is awarded to a school that has been open for 2 to 3 years. It's almost a catch-22 system when you have individuals that want to start a new school, that follow all the rules, that write all the grants, that follow every protocol that there is to start a new school and hire the teachers. The system is almost set up to make the school fail. Without the proper funding, they can't get proper teachers. Without proper funding, you can't get a decent physical location for the school. And there again, you can't get the student enrollment that you need to have also to be able to receive the funding. So the lever in the upper left corner, funding, is huge. It's a huge culprit in the success and the sustainability of the school system at RBA. Another lever, I think, is the Department of Education and the way it is set up to not have more impact on what individual states can do and not have more impact on how legislation can be triggered to help create policies that advance education for individual demographics and not put the system into kind of a one size fits all, one shoe fits all, square peg in a round hole type of a situation. The interconnections in this system I also thought were couplings. And if we start at the top of the page, which systems are interconnected? Well, you can see I think there's two of them. The funding and the MDE grants and loans are tied together. They are almost inseparable. However, I found it very interesting that the DOE and the Minnesota legislature would be coupled with the people that are at the school. It's the people that are at schools, the students, the administration, the staff, the faculty, teachers, that kind of thing, that are the vectors for change, that actually do speak out to better changes, stopping things that are not functioning and sustainable in a school system. And it's their voice that gets carried to the legislature, which is actually responsible for making the changes that we want. It's the voting system. It's our democracy that helps to enact the change. And when I started writing this out, I thought, wow, that was really neat. That's democracy in action right there. Although it doesn't feel like it when I'm at the school every day, it was interesting to see that on the piece of paper here or in this PowerPoint, that is almost an inseparable connection. And I wonder if the school system is in such disrepair throughout our country because we simply are just not getting the votes and our voices carried to the legislature so that schools can be improved for the students that attend them. So with funding being the lever that really hinges the sustainability of RBA, it can impact everything. The morale of the teachers dropped significantly at the beginning of the year. Curriculum and learning outcomes really didn't even begin until around Thanksgiving. As this was the first year for the charter school, there was such a huge learning curve for all. And the school has been a success for the demographic that it is teaching, which is primarily autism spectrum disorder and anxiety disorder. And there is comorbidity in this group with learning disabilities, specific learning disabilities, as well as some emotional behavioral things. So the demographic that's being taught at this school from grades 6 through 10 is quite a pronounced demographic that you don't normally see in a normal school makeup. It's usually a smaller percentage, but that percentage is very high at RBA. And with more funding, the school would have been able to have much greater success at meeting their purpose, meeting their mission statement without compromising the system that exists for it right now. Thank you for listening, and I hope this helped you to understand the inner workings of a school. And if you're a parent and you've never been a teacher before, when you get to conference time, it's really not just about the teachers as I thought it was before I started teaching this last semester and experiencing a whole completely different ballgame from what I had watched before. These are my sources, and I invite you to visit the US DOE's website. It's pretty informative about the powerful system we have here in America for schooling our children. Thank you.